So basically what you're doing with this Great Migration Project is you are being historians. But all I do when I stand up here and talk is give you my perspective on these time periods, on these people, based on all the things I've read, things I've watched, I thought I put into it. Think about how many times I make reference to Imagine Community or Tipping Point. Right? Imagine Community and Tipping Point help me read these various sources and kind of organize them, make some sense of them. That's essentially what you're doing with this project. Remember, the basic question that you're answering, the big question that you're answering is the Great Migration beneficial or not? Is it good or bad? Is it beneficial or a disadvantage for those that are going to make this trip? Part of how you answer that depends on the sources that you're looking at. Historians read sources, right? Their interpretations aren't just pulled out of nowhere. Their interpretations come from analyzing the sources that they read. So there are several sources that you will be looking at. And on the Blackboard site is a whole folder titled Great Migration. This project can be done without you, Great Migration Project folder. This whole project can be done without you getting outside sources at all. You have everything you need and more in your textbook, and the stuff we've seen and discussed, and in this folder. And everything, all the handouts are in there as well. The first one is the overview that we looked at last time. And this is the 7 letters from the Great Migration that I just gave you. Historians look at a variety of types of sources. There are primary sources, there are secondary sources. What's a primary source? Anybody know what a primary source is? Can you give me an example of one? Don't have a lot of time, so I'll tell you. Primary sources are what I just gave you. Letters would count as a primary source. It's written by the person, it's them putting their views down at a certain moment. We can read them later, but we can tell exactly how they were viewing the situation. Right? Primary sources are sources from the time period, written by the people themselves. So a letter, a diary, sometimes newspaper reports, if they interview someone, right, and they say, well, how do you feel about that race riot? Well, I was in it, and this and that. That can then be a primary source. Secondary sources are written after the fact, someone's interpretation of the history. Your textbook is a secondary source. Your textbook authors have read these types of letters, and then they write something about the Great Migration. The Great Migration was this and that. People came for the following reasons. That's essentially what you're doing. You're putting together primary and secondary sources in order to make your argument. Your argument is going to answer this question about whether the Great Migration is positive or negative. So a primary source like this can be very valuable. Think about your own life. I always use the example of your high school sweetheart. If you guys had a falling out, there might be letters back from whatever you were in high school, 2005, we'll say. Right? I love you. Oh, I love you so much. You're the best. I can't breathe without you. Right? All these things you might have written at the time. That's good. That's a good game. Oh, you guys can borrow that if you want. Now you're like, oh, she was a trip. She loved this and that, right? 10 years later, your interpretation may have changed about that situation in 2005. So what's usually most helpful is to read both. You want to read those letters that were written at the time and maybe think back to what you were thinking then. But now you also have some distance from it. Maybe you can analyze it. Oh, yeah, she was controlling anyway. That's why, right? Maybe you want to be able to analyze it from both sides. That's what historians essentially want to do. They want to read people's letters and diaries, but you can't trust everything folks say. So you also want to read newspapers, other books about the Great Migration, all these sorts of things. The more you can hear and read and think about and incorporate into your argument, the better your argument will be. Right? It's about how you use this evidence to support it. I don't care what your opinion is about it being positive or negative, the Great Migration. How do you support it? How do you arrive at that conclusion? What examples do you use? How does your main character help you talk about it? Now, you don't have to write the whole paper. Your whole paper is not going to be about one main character. You might use, say, Marcus Garvey just to introduce the idea of why people are coming to Harlem, New York. Maybe it's a quote from Garvey that opens it up, or a quote from Josephine Baker, who we'll talk about coming up, Madam C.J. Walker. How do they help you talk about the specific themes of the Great Migration? So, for example, what I just gave you, 7 letters from the Great Migration. These are letters that were sent from people wanting to migrate. Right? African Americans wanting to migrate send letters to the Chicago Defender. Chicago Defender was one of the largest black newspapers at the time. The Chicago Defender had all these advertisements enticing African Americans to migrate north, saying things like, you know, we got all these new jobs in Chicago, they pay great, why don't you come up here and work? And so thousands of African Americans write letters to the Chicago Defender to try to find out how they can get north. So I'll give you a couple quick examples. First part of this handout is just a summary, first of all. It says between 1916 1921, 500,000 African Americans left the South, journeyed to cities in the North and West, and it was then the largest internal movement of a people in such a concentrated period of time. So that first 5 years, 500,000 people come. As we know, by 1970, 6 million people are going to come. But it really starts during this period, right around World War I. Migrants' letters to northern newspapers were among the best and most voluminous sources for understanding the migration. We want to understand why people are leaving. That may help you answer the question as to, did they find what they were looking for? Was it a good thing for them or a bad thing? Because they're going to tell you why they want to migrate. Interpreting migrants' motivations for leaving. 7 letters to the Chicago Defender, a black newspaper published in Chicago that strongly urged Southern blacks to migrate north, attest to migrants' strong desire to better their condition, often risking their lives. Sociologists and others that study migrations and immigration will tell you that there are usually push and pull factors in immigration, right? Something is pushing you out of your old home, something is probably pulling you to your new home. So, for example, these African Americans, many of them are going to write about, and there's lynching, racial violence down here, the cotton crop is bad, can't find work. I want to come to Chicago. I heard there's all these good jobs, there's better schools, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And you'll see it in some of the letters. Think about the push and the pull factors. This first one says, Dear Sir, I've been reading the Chicago Defender. It's written by someone from Lutcher, Louisiana, May 13, 1917. About a year after Garvey comes to New York, this person wants to come to Chicago. So many advertisements about the work in the North. I thought to write you concerning my condition. And think about the themes that emerge from this person writing. Why are they coming? What do they expect? I'm working hard in the South and can hardly earn a living. I have a wife and 1 child and can hardly feed them. That tells you something right there. This is going to be a man writing. Part of why he wants to leave is he says, look, I'm a hard worker, but I can't feed my family. Can't take care of my family. He doesn't feel like a man in a sense. Right? So this is about economic motivation. It also might be about gender. Right? He can't fulfill what he sees as his manly duties in the South and wants to leave for that reason. It's amazing how often that comes up in the letters from men and many of the letters from women. Like, I can't feed myself, can't take care of myself and kids, right? So economics could be a theme for both men and women, in fact, although women may have some additional reasons of wanting to leave as well, as you'll see. I do not want to leave my family behind, as I can hardly make a living for them right here with them, and I know they would fare hard if I would leave them. Now, a lot of folks do leave family members behind initially. Right? You might leave kids with an aunt, go try to get this factory job before it's gone, and then send for your children, send for your wife after the fact. A lot of times that would happen. This guy says, I can't leave my family. He doesn't know, what will happen with them if he leaves, even if it's for their benefit. If there are agents in the South, there haven't been any of them to Lutcher. What he's saying there is he's talking about these employment agents. Many of the factories in the North need labor. Remember, we're at war at this point. Many of the men that had occupied traditional industrial jobs are gone, fighting, and labor is needed. Much of this labor is going to come from African Americans in the South. And so a lot of these factories in the North sending a white agent down to places like Lutcher, Louisiana, and say, hey, we've got 100 jobs. You can just get on the train. I'll pay your fare. Go up there, get you a job. You'll make 10 times as much as you were making here. So many people start to leave. But you'll see there's going to be a reaction to this many folks leaving too. It says if there are agents in the South, there haven't been any of them to Lutcher. They haven't made it to his small town yet. If they would come here, they would get at least 50 men. He's like, look, not only am I willing to come, I got 50 people just like me. All we need is a ticket. Let's go. Please, sir, let me hear from you as quick as possible. Now, this is all. Please don't publish my letter. Now, this guy is saying, look, we'll come, but keep this quiet. Keep this quiet for now. That tells you something. Part of what it tells you is how the white South starts to respond to these thousands of sharecroppers and poor black workers and farmers that are suddenly getting on these trains like, I'm out. I'll never see Mississippi again. There is a reaction. All of a sudden, you start getting white Southerners show up to the train station with their shotgun, like, now you need to get back to that cotton field. They're like, wait a second, you just lynched my cousin. Obviously, you don't want us here. I'm just going to go ahead and get back to that field. Like, they need the labor. They need the labor. They want to continue to control this labor. So he says here, look, don't spread this, don't publish it yet, right? And don't publish it till I'm gone. He'll say this again. I was out in town today talking to some of the men, and they say if they could get passes, that 30 or 40 of them would come. But they haven't got the money, they don't know how to come. But they are good, strong, and able working men. If you will instruct me, I will instruct the other men how to come, as they all want to work. Please don't publish this, because we have to whisper this around among ourselves, because the white folks are angry now because the Negroes are coming north. It's pretty explicit, like, don't publish it, it could get me killed. There are a few other letters in here. Most of them are from men, but I want to skip down to the number 3 at the bottom down there, from someone in Selma, Alabama, May 19, 1917. Again, you'll see some similarities and maybe some differences. Dear sirs, I'm a reader of the Chicago Defender. I think it is one of the most wonderful papers of our race printed. Sirs, I'm writing to see if you all, again, you see some of the broken language and whatnot. These are primary sources, how folks were doing their best to try to communicate. I'm writing to see if you all will please get me a job. So again, it's an economic motivation. Sir, I can wash dishes, wash, iron, nursing work, and groceries and dry goods stores. Just any of these I can do. Look, I can do any variety of work. Just get me up there. Sir, whosoever you get the job from, please tell them to send me a ticket and I will pay them when I get there, as I have not enough money to pay my way. I'm a girl of 17 years old and in the 8th grade. Right, so this is a female migrant, 17 in the 8th grade. Tells you something too. She has not been able to go consistently through school, probably had to try to work. She has some education. And she's talking about trying to come herself. But on account of not having enough money, I had to stop school. Sir, I will thank you all with all my heart. May God bless you. So part of what I want you to see in letters like this, and I have some more in the site here that we'll talk about next time. Reasons why people are coming. Economics is going to be a major one. Family is going to be a major one. Education is going to be a major one. I want to educate my kids. I can't do this in the South. For women mention and sometimes don't mention fear of rape. A lot of women say, I got to get up out of here. Right? They're trying to do things. A lot of men are talking about lynching. So there are a variety of reasons why people are going to come. Yet, what happens when folks go to Chicago, say in 1917, and then in 1919 there's a huge race riot in Chicago? What if they were fleeing lynching, and then they walk right into a race riot? This is part of why you can answer this big question about whether this was a positive or a negative migration in a variety of ways. Your argument is going to be up to you. How you make that argument, though, is going to be based on the sources that you find. So that's why you have to start thinking about your argument, your thesis, and start working your way through these sources. If you haven't read chapters 14 and 15, you need to. Talk about the migration here. You may find a main character in that chapter. You may find one here. You may find one in one of the visuals that we see. Some of you may know people that migrated and use them as your main character. So start thinking, if you haven't yet, about your thesis statement. Right? This project is actually, it says it's going to be due the 14th. It's going to be due the 16th. I'm going to push it back a day because I want to have one more class day in that week to finish this up. So we'll be talking about this Thursday and next Tuesday as well. What you're doing besides this, today is due, the Jack Johnson questions are due. If you haven't turned those in yet, the Dropbox has been up. That's due 11:59 tonight based on the video. And the multiple choice for 14 and 15. And that's going to be due Friday. I'm going to post it either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm not sure if I'll get to it after this meeting. 20 questions, about 10 from chapter 14, about 10 from chapters 15. Those are the next two things that we're working on, and then continue to think about this project and what your thesis statement might be. Questions, problems with any of that? All right.